everybody. Hope you all are fine. The topic of discussion for today is skeletal muscles, their various aspects, including classifications. A typical skeletal muscle is a mouse-shaped structure which is composed of variable number of highly excitable and contractile elongated muscle cells which are also named as fibers. These muscles are found throughout the body and they are designed to contract in response to a stimulus. They have got various features. Number one, characteristics of the skeletal muscle. They are organized in distinct groups for specific actions. They are associated with skeleton for various movements. They are primarily involved in movements and posture. Their actions are coordinated by the nervous system. All these characteristics transform them into an excellent effector system. As regard the actions, skeletal muscles are capable of a wide range of highly complex actions, such as locomotion in the shape of posture and stability. They are involved in conservation of the internal heat. They perform highly sophisticated actions like sorrow and grief. And finally, skeletal muscles develop from the mesoderm layer of the embryo. Parts and structural organization of the skeletal muscles. First, the parts. A typical skeletal muscle have got four parts. Number one is origin. Origin is that part of the muscle which remains fixed during any movement. Usually it is considered to be the proximal and medial part of the muscle. Second part is belly, which is the central fleshy part and is actually the main muscle mass and is composed of muscle fibers. This part determines the action of the muscle. Third part is the tendon. It is the strong connective tissue structure which is meant for attachment of the muscle to the skeletal component. Number fourth is insertion. It is the attachment that moves during the movement and is usually considered to be the distal and medial part of the muscle. A notable point is that origin of a muscle may behave like insertion at times. Examples are psoas major and latissimus dorsi muscles. To avoid this confusion, nowadays attachments proximal or distal are used instead of origin and insertion. As regards the structural organization, the basic structural and functional unit of the muscle is a muscle fiber, which is a single multinucleated cell. It is covered by an irregular connective tissue sheath which is named as endomysium. A group of muscle fibers join together to form bundles, which are also named as fascicle. Each fascicle is covered over by a loose connective tissue sheath which is named as perimysium. A group of bundles unite together to form an entity which is named as muscle, and muscle is covered over by a dense connective tissue sheath which is named as epimysium. A group of muscles having same or almost same functions are separated from other groups having different functions by connective tissue septa, and the space in which such a group is located is named as compartment. Now a few definitions relating to skeletal muscle. Number one is motor unit. It is a somatic motor neuron and the muscle mass innervated by it. It has got variable number of muscle fibers which determine the size and function of the unit. Example being large thigh motor unit as compared to very small extraocular muscle motor units. On the average, there are 100 fibers in a motor unit. Number two is muscle strength. It is the ability to contract and create force in response to resistance. Excessive use leads to enlargement of the muscle fibers in the shape of hypertrophy, and non-use or less use leads to decrease in size of the muscle, which is named as atrophy. Number three, muscle tone. It is the tension in a muscle at rest. It is due to contraction of a few muscle units at the time of rest. Muscle fibers follow the rule of all or none. That is, a muscle fiber is either in a contracted state or it is in a relaxed state. Now let us proceed to the classification of skeletal muscle. First, the criteria for the classification. As there is wide variation among the size, shape, architecture, and mode of attachment of muscles, each muscle is adapted to provide an appropriate number one, range of movement, which depends upon length of the muscle fibers. Number two, force of contraction, which depends upon the effective mass of contractile tissue, that is number of fibers. Number three, direction of pull, which depends upon the angle or direction of the muscle fibers. By keeping all these criteria in mind, skeletal muscles are classified according to architecture or form, action or role in movements, vectoral analysis or force of contraction, mode of attachment, regional or location wise, and according to the color of the muscles. Number one, classification according to architecture or form. This classification depends upon the number of bellies of the muscle, number of heads of origin, or disposition of the fibers of the muscles. First, classification according to muscle bellies. Two groups. First, monogastric, the muscles which have got one belly, and most of the muscles of the body belong to this group. Second group is digastric muscles, which have got two bellies, and this group is represented by digastric and omohyoid muscle. Second, according to heads of origin. First, bicipital muscles are the muscle which have got two heads of origin, represented by biceps brachii and biceps femoris. Two, tricipital muscles have three origin, and this group is represented by triceps brachii and triceps surae. Next is quadriceps muscles, which have got four heads of origin, and this group is represented by quadriceps femoris. Number three, according to disposition of the muscle fiber. This Group is further divided into two groups. Number one, muscle fibers having parallel fibers, and number two, muscle fibers having oblique fiber. First, the muscle muscles which have got parallel fiber. In this group, fibers of the muscles are in line with the pull of the muscle, and this group is represented by number one, quadrilateral muscles, which have got almost a quadrilateral shape, represented by thyroid and hyoglossus. Number two, strap muscle. Such muscles are elongated with parallel fibers, represented by sartorius muscle. Third is strap with tendinous intersections, elongated muscles with intersections, represented by rectus abdominis muscle. Fourth is fusiform muscle. In this category, all the muscle fibers they converge and are attached to a central tendon. This category is represented by biceps brachii muscle. Second group, muscles with oblique fibers. In this group, muscle fibers are oriented at an angle to the line of the pull of the muscle, and they are number one, pennate muscle. First, the bipennate muscle, which are just similar to feather of a bird and are represented by rectus femoris and dorsal interossei. Unipennate muscles are like half of a feather and represented by flexor pollicis longus and tibialis posterior. Third, multipennate, a number of bipennate are placed side by side and are represented by deltoid and subscapularis muscle. Fourth is radial muscles, in which all the muscle fibers get attached to the top of a tendon, and this type of muscle is represented by tibialis anterior. Second subgroup is triangular muscles, in which muscle have got a wide origin and a very narrow insertion, so that the shape of the muscle becomes triangular, and this type of muscles are represented by adductor magnus and temporalis. Next is spiral muscles, muscles which have got a twist and represented by trapezius muscle. Next is cruciate muscle, in which two parts of a muscle cross each other and are represented by sternomastoid and masseter muscles. And the last one are the circular muscle, in which muscle fibers are oriented in a circle, that is, they get origin from a point, they encircle and then again get attached almost at the original point, so that it makes a circle. These are represented by eye muscle, orbicularis oris, and oral muscle, orbicularis oris. Second classification according to action or role of a muscle during a movement. According to this classification, there are four groups. Number one are the agonists, which are actually the prime movers. They initiate and maintain desired action or movement, and the example is brachialis during flexion at the elbow joint. Antagonist, the second group. These muscles oppose action of the prime movers, or they neutralize and restrict the range of movement by prime movers. These muscles remain silent during early part of the movement, but they become active only during later part of the movement, and the example is triceps during flexion at the elbow joint. One thing to remember is that antagonist and agonist have got reciprocal innervation. Third group is synergists. These muscles are mutually helpful to the prime movers. They help them perform action more powerfully by usually being partially antagonist to the prime movers, and they prevent the untoward movement at the proximal joint involved. Example are the extensor of the corpus during fist formation. Fourth group is fixator or stabilizers. They provide a fixed or immobile base for the prime movers to act. Hence, they stabilize the joint. The example is muscles of the rotator cuff during abduction at shoulder joint. Third classification according to vectoral analysis. First, what is the vector? It is a quantity having direction as well as magnitude, commonly represented by a directed line having two segments. Length, which indicate the magnitude, and orientation in space, which indicate the direction of the vector. By analysis, action of a muscle can be divided into two components, N and E, at right angle to each other as shown in the diagram. Now, notable thing is that all the muscles have at least two attachments, origin and insertion, which indicate the length of the muscle, and a specific orientation, which indicate the direction in relation to a joint. Hence, a musculoskeletal complex around a joint can be divided into three components or segments. These are: number one, mobile segment, which extends from the joint to the insertion. Number two is spin segment, which is only if the muscle is attached eccentrically away from the center. And number three is the fixed component, which extends from origin to the joint. By applying the knowledge gained, now let us analyze the action of a muscle having insertion away from the line of the pull. Hence, its actions can be divided into three components. Number one, shunt component. This component is parallel to the long axis of the mobile component. Hence, this component pushes the mobile component into the fixed component at the joint. Hence, it stabilizes the joint, and the action is named as predominantly shunting action, and the muscles named as shunt muscles, represented by coracobrachialis, short head of biceps, and long head of triceps. These muscles resist downward dislocating forces when carrying a luggage. Second component is swing component. This component acts at right angle to the long axis of the mobile component. Hence, this is the main force which moves the mobile segment. Hence, it predominantly bends the mobile segment, and the muscle which have got predominantly bending action of the mobile segment are named as spurt muscle, represented by brachialis and quadriceps femoris. Third component is spin component. This component appears because of the eccentric attachment of a muscle. Hence, this muscle rotates the mobile segment and predominantly have rotatory action. And such muscles are named as spin muscles, represented by pronator quadratus and pronator teres muscles. Now let us discuss clinical significance of the skeletal muscle. First, the muscle integrity. Structural and functional integrity of skeletal muscle is dependent upon number one, blood supply, and number two, nerve supply. If there is obstruction of the blood supply or circulation, it leads to localized death of the tissue, which is named as gangrene. If there is interruption of the nerve supply, this leads to changes in the skin, fascia, and muscles, etc., which are named as trophic changes or neurotrophic atrophy. Now, trophic changes in the muscle. If nerve is cut altogether, wasting of the muscle takes place, which is named as muscular atrophy. If a muscle is not used for a longer time, wasting of the muscle occurs and the term is used disuse muscular atrophy. Constant use against resistance leads to enlargement of the muscle and the condition is named as muscular hypertrophy. If there is interruption of motor nerve supply to a muscle, that leads to loss of muscle power and the condition is named as paralysis. Paralysis could be of two types because of upper motor neuron lesion or lower motor neuron lesion. In upper motor neuron lesion, as upper motors are not directly involved in the innervation of the muscle, hence there is no change in the size of the muscle. But in case of lower motor neuron type of lesion, as the lower motors neurons are intimately related with the integrity of the muscle, hence lower motor neuron leads to atrophy of the muscle. Another notable point is that skeletal muscles have got limited power of regeneration. If there is massive damage to the muscle, muscle mass is not replaced by the muscle mass, but it is replaced by a scar made of connective tissue. Now, clinical significance, second group comprising abnormal contractions of skeletal muscles. First, the spasm. It is a sudden involuntary contraction of a single muscle in a group of muscles. Number two, cramp. It is a painful spasmodic contraction of a group of muscle which could be due to inadequate blood flow, overusage, dehydration, injury, or prolonged use, and low blood levels of electrolytes such as potassium. Number three, tick. It is a spasmodic twitching, that is repetitive occurrence of a same action involuntarily. Examples are number one, twitching of the eye, and number two, facial twitchings. Number four, fasciculation. It is an involuntary brief twitch of an entire motor unit which is visible under the skin. It is irregular and not associated with any movement. It may be seen in multiple sclerosis or in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Finally, the tremor. It is a rhythmic, involuntary, purposeless contraction which produces a shaking movement. Comments and suggestions will be welcomed. Thank you for listening and watching.